haggard. Anyways, so we're gonna be discussing social work and jurisprudence, and I'm gonna be using the notes from Attorney Redem Macabenta. With that, let's start. Yeah? Oh, okay. So, just to quickly go over the Philippine narrative para ma-explain yun sa pagkapurma sa Pilipinas, right? So, before, we were composed of different tribes. So, wala pa Philippines, technically, nga nag-exist back then. But, after ani is naatay mga leaders called Datu, naputay mga Council of Elders, no, nga, tawag na itong government during this time. So, Magellan discovered the Philippines in 1521, and he brought the Philippine people, to the knowledge of Spain, wherein Miguel Lopez de Legazpi came back in 1565 and established the Philippine insular government under the crown of Spain, which lasted for more than 333 years. And this period was marked by, of course, very religious society. So, we were colonized by Spain for that long. And then, ang atong mga leaders like Rizal, Bonifacio, Aguinaldo, and many others were the Filipino revolutionaries who ended, or so we thought, Spanish sovereignty in the Philippines. And on June 12, 1898, gideclare ang Philippine independence kuno. And then 1899, the following year, so the first Philippine Republic was established through the Malolos Constitution. And this was actually the first constitution or democratic constitution ever to be promulgated in the whole of Asia. However, this is short-lived kay nga naman gibaligya naman sa Spain ngadto sa US through the Treaty of Paris on December 10, 1898. So gibaligya ta from Spain karon US sa punang tagiya sa atua. And they first organized a military government, but eventually they settled into civilian rule through the Spooner Amendment in 1901, which established William Howard Taft as the first governor. So throughout this time sa US, daghan kay mga changes in the government, natay creation of the Philippine Assembly, Philippine Commission with the bicameral legislature, and then nanapod tay Philippine legislature, nga Congress ang style, through the Jones Law. And the Jones Law, which lasted from 1916 to 1935, created the Tidings-McDuffie Act. This is an act which created the Commonwealth of the Philippines, kay mura ni siya trial kuno nga government. So, they promised independence to us Filipinos if within 10 years we can prove our capacity to lead our own government. However, we also faced a lot of challenges during this time through the Second World War, wherein we were also occupied by the Japanese. So, the Second Republic was actually headed by President Jose P. Laurel during this occupation, and this was called the puppet government, kay under agad sa mga Hapon. On the 4th of July 1946, coinciding with the end of the World War II, the United States formally withdrew its sovereignty over the Philippines, and President Manuel A. Rojas, kanang tao nga nasa 100 peso bill, asserted the freedom of the Filipino people and proclaimed the Republic of the Philippines. However, things are not that smooth sailing even until now. So, during the time of Marcos, in September 21, 1972, nag-proclaim siya og martial law because apparently daghan kuno og movement sa communist groups during this time. Daghan kay issues. Of course, the martial law is a topic in and of itself, but he also conducted a snap election with the basis sa iyang own resignation, which is considered by the Philippine Bar Association to be invalid because nganong ang iyang resignation mukam man after pa sa election, which would have been the grounds for the snap election niya. Kay liman ka ana nga mura kag nangita og kapuli nimo bisag pa ka ni-resign. So bawal man ang ganan sa Philippine Constitution in 1973. So still he did it, and nagpa-elections kunuhay sila and nakadaog kunuhay siya. But in February 22, 1986, Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile and General Fidel V. Ramos, they kind of unwittingly started the People Power One revolution, which eventually led to the Marcos family being ousted, and the presidency was given to Corazon Aquino and Vice President Doy Laurel in 1986. So, ang first nga act ni Cory was the promulgation of a Provisional Freedom Constitution. So, nag-create tagbag nga constitution. So, nanapod tay kon ani, and then this was submitted to the people on February 2, 1987 and ratified sometime around that rapod. And then we also held some elections during this time, And the following president after Cory was FVR and Joseph Estrada. So in 1998, Joseph Estrada was also elected president. However, he also got ousted from office through the People Power 2 in 2001, which is ang nipuli si GMA. So, si GMA, nipuli siya, but then ingon siya di siya mudagan, but then eventually nidagan, magyapon siya balik, nakadaog na po siya pag 2004 for another term. However, this win was controversial because of the Hello Garci tapes nga niingon nga gi-cheat nila ang elections. So, ganun. After ni Arroyo, so nanapod tayo Aquino, and then Aquino, Duterte, and then BM na naman. So, okay. So, with that, given sa history sa Philippines, we now talk about the basic concepts of a state. So, unsa de ay na siya ang state. So, because we always say the Philippine state. So, what does that mean? So, the state is a community of persons, more or less numerous, permanently occupying a fixed territory and possessed of an independent government organized for political ends to which the great body of inhabitants render habitual obedience. So, ang state na ay nadiritan ng elements na sa within the statement. So, ang state kuno na ay community of people nga dapat daghan. Kaya di man na pwede mahog ang state kung gamay ra mo. Although the number is debatable. Dapat na mo inyong territory nga gi-occupy. Naapod mo independent government nga gi-use ninyo for the greater good of your own citizens. So, mingon ta sometimes unsa may nakalahi sa nation o sa state. So, the nation is used interchangeably sometimes. So, this is a mistake as two concepts have different connotations. Kung mingon ganitag nation, meaning it's more about the relation of birth, your nationality per se, so asa ka nga country na tao, then dito ka nga na nation, or sometimes even your race. However, ang state is a legal concept. So, makaingon ta na ay Philippine nga nation when we refer to the people, for example. But mingon kitag Philippine state, that includes the people, the government, the territory we have, and so on. So, with that, a nation may comprise several states. For example, Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Jordan, Algeria, and Libya, which all belong to the Arab nation. Okay, ethnically or racially, they are Arab, but they are different states on their own. So, dapat po, lahi po ang state sa government. Kaya di man po ta kaingon the Philippine state, meaning the Philippine government. Not necessarily that alone. So, ang state man ang principal, the government, its agent. So, ang government part lang na siya sa state. Okay, so, with that, ano the elements sa state? So, natay people. Of course, walay state kung walay tao. Ngunit mga tao nga nagpuyo within the territory nga naa sa state. So, walay, as I said ganina, wala man yung exact number para matawag mo nga state, but it should be numerous enough, meaning daghan mo enough nga makasurvive mo on your own, you guys, and also defend yourselves. But also, small enough nga dili pud nubra pud kayo mo kadaghan nga lisod na pud kayo mo i-govern. So, naay mga states like China, 1 billion ang ilang population, napoy uban mini state like Qatar nga 100,000 lang kapin ilaha. And so, the people are more comprehensive and less cohesive than the nation. So, dili siya technically super united, but still, since you belong in the same territory, you are amorphic, and you have the similar or the same certain characteristics and interests, and na may mga commonality, then you are already a nation. So, Malcolm defines a nation as a people bound together by common attractions and repulsions into a living organism. So, commonality. Dapat naapod may common history and common fate. Okay? So, ang sunod nga element sa state, ang territory. So, mahog ba mong state kung wala mo gipuy-an nga tugkaran? So, of course not. So, territory is a fixed portion of the surface of the earth inhabited by the people of the state. So, practical requirement lang ni siya. There's no requirement unsa mo kagami, unsa mo kadak-a basta na-meet ni nga element. So, it must be neither too big to be difficult to administer, nor too small to be unable to provide for the needs of your people. So, it can be a large expanse or a small area. So, natay different elements sa territory. Mauna yung gitawag na terrestrial, meaning ang inyong yuta. Maritime, o ang fluvial, meaning ang inyong karagatan, o ang inyong airspace, which is the aerial domain. So, the Philippine Archipelago's national territory includes the islands, the waters within the islands, and all the other territories over which the Philippines has sovereignty or jurisdiction. So, apil na ito ang terrestrial, fluvial, and aerial domains. So, the waters around, between, and connecting the islands of the archipelago, regardless of unsa kadaka, unsa kalakda, are part of the internal waters of the Philippines. So, third element sa state government. Walay state nga walay government. So, it is the agency or instrumentality through which the will of the state is formulated, expressed, and realized. unsa may purpose sa government? So the government, without people, there will be no government. Diba? Di ba sa tayo nga, without government, wala people. Naaman dyan. Which is why the power of the government comes from the people themselves. So they are just the entity, magitalaga nato, nga mo take care sa ato. So no particular form of government mo dyan prescribed. Kaya na may lain-lain nga types of government. As long as ma-represent lang ta sa, as a state in, whenever we deal with other states as well. But ang ato sa Philippines, we are democratic and republican. Okay, so ang mandato sa government is ang kalambuan o ang kaayuhan sa mga tao, the welfare of the people. So whatever good is done by the government is attributed to the state. Pero kung unsa man gani dili maayong nga mabuhat sa tao, sa government sa government ra na siya. Okay? Kay pwede man ilisan ang government. Fourth and last element of the state is sovereignty. Sovereignty is a supreme and uncontrollable power inherent in a state by which that state is governed. So naamoy power within yourself and even to others. So naidto ako nung mga klase sa sovereignty, natay legal o ang political. Okay? So when we say act of state, unsa man na siya? It is an act done by the sovereign power of a country or by its delegate within the limits of the power vested in him. So ang state na ay siya power itself. So more siya nahug na persona sa inyong nation. So karon nga kabana ta sa basic concept sa state, aron na sa basic concept of the law. So unsa din ang law? So the law is any rule of action, norm of conduct applicable to all kinds of action and to all objects of creation. So tanan nga law ma-include ta. Pero sa legal nga aspect, law is the rule of conduct which should be just and obligatory, laid down by legitimate authority for common observance and benefit, according to Sanchez Roman. So with that, unsa the elements sa law? First, it is a rule of conduct. So ang purpose sa law gyud no is para i-guide ta, tudluan tag unsay pwede, unsay bawal buhaton in relation to others. Because dili man pud pwede personal lang ang law. Law should be communal man jud. Then second element, law must be just. Naa ba di ay law nga dili makatarungan. So the chapter on human relations is now precisely embedded in the new civil code to establish social order. So law, aside from the fact na it is a guide for human conduct, no, based on the first element, should run as golden threads kuno through society nga ang ideal ang atong makuha. So ang dominance of justice mo ang atong ideal. Third, it must be obligatory. Mahog pa ba siya law kung dili tanan tao ang mo follow? So if laws are not enforced, the purpose for which they are intended will not be served. So dapat tanan yun ang obligated mo follow sa law. Fourth element, laws must be prescribed by legitimate authority. Dili man pwede basta-basta kinsa-kinsa lang maghimo og law. So it should be people or electorals nga authorized by the people themselves to prescribe law. So the sovereignty resides in the people, but the government is the one who is given the authority by the people themselves to create these laws. Number 5, laws must be ordained for the common benefit. Wala man dyan law nga makaguba unta, no? Sa certain population. Kaya ang law is created specifically because naatay goal nga, ang welfare of the people shall be the supreme law. So, walay law dapat nga himuon nga ikabati nato. Okay? So, asa man na magikan ang law? Sa Pilipinas at least. So, first, legislation. So, kung unsay asa man ang mga law usually nagikan, so sa pag-create sa Congress. In this case, karon Congress na ta, which is composed of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then, naapod tayo President. So, unsa man yung meaning sa law based on President? Sa court, naman ay mga certain decisions created by the judge, which is interpretation nila sa law, right? Mo ni siya ang pasabot nga. Kung unsa gani decision sa previous nga judge on as very similar case, maupod na dapat ang i-follow sa current nga mga cases sa pag-decide because it is on the doctrine of stare decisis. So, naapod tayo customs. So, naatay customs within our culture which can become law. No? So, naapod tayo court decisions. So, judicial decisions which apply or interpret the Constitution and the laws are part of the legal system in the Philippines. So, they are not technically laws, but these decisions can become the kanang mura bitog sample kumbaga yun sa pag-practice ang law. So ma-follow na siya dapat kay lagi based man ta sa precedents. Ini siya mga civil mga Roman law maxims and stuff. So with that, let's remember no nga unsa ditong branches of the government. So naatay executive, the president, legislative, so the Congress, composed of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the judiciary, so like the courts, Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Regional Trial Court, Municipal Trial Court, and so on. So, with that, how are statutes enacted? So, ang Constitution kuno, Section 1, Article 6, provides nga ang legislative power naa sa Kongreso consisted of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Mingon kitag na legislative power, it is the power to make, alter, usbo ninyo, on and repeal or inyong i-void ang mga certain laws. So, it is the authority under the Constitution to make laws, to alter, and to repeal them. So, ang Constitution, di ba, will of the people man siya. So, ang people muhatag nag legislative power sa Congress nga mo create, mo handle, mo check, mo sa mga balaod, which should be representative of their humanity. So, dili ni pwede nga ang legislative power na lang sa Senate or na lang sa House of Representatives. They are two chambers, bicameral chamber, which work together as one Congress of the Philippines. So, the Constitution has explicitly provided that legislative power is the power to enact laws. So, ang legislative, mao ang tighimo. Executive, ang mo execute or mo buhat, mo implement sa laws, mo pirma and all that. And judicial, ang mo interpret o apply sa mga balaod. Okay, so they work together, system of balance. Checks and balances. Okay. So how does a law become a law? So from a bill into a law, a bill is proposed within either the Congress or the Senate, and it is introduced by a member of the Congress for enactment into law. So it may come from either the lower or the upper house. Except sa GAA, nga dapat naagid siya sa House of Representatives na gikan. So, ang unsa may process, first and second hearings, sunod committee hearings, and then mag-third hearing, then conference committee reports. So, unsa may kanang mga reports sa inyong committee, nakita ninyo ang mga need i-discuss, i-authentify na ninyo ang bills, and then you give it to the President for approval. If the President does veto or dili siya mo approve, mabalik na sa Congress, and then ang Congress na yung decide if ili ba nang i-accept ang iyang veto or dili. So now let's go on the discussion of state principles and policies. So just a quick rundown. So as I said earlier, the Philippines is a democratic and republican state. Ang sovereignty, ang gahom, naa sa mga tao. Okay? So walay otoridad ang gobyerno kung dili tungod sa mga tao. So muna to siya napatimanan. So ang Philippines, mo renounce kuno sa gera, isip instrumento sa national nga polisiya. So, dapat ang ato ako nung gusto kay policy of peace, equality, justice, freedom, cooperation, and amity with all nations. Sunod, ang civilian authority naglabaw sa military. Ang military gitalaga lang na para protektahan tao ang estado. Dili kay manghadlok sa ato. Ang primero nga mandato o trabaho sa gobyerno mao ang pagserbisyoan o protektaan ang katawhan. Pwede pod manawag ang government nga i-defend ang state through military or personal military or civil service. So, ang promotion sa general welfare sa people mao ang essential for enjoyment by the blessings of democracy. And then Section 6, separation of church and state shall be inviolable. So, any decisions made within the government should be separate from personal faith. So, this underlines how important religion is in the Philippines, that we have this even in our constitution. So, we also have a lot of things about state policies like just dynamic social order that will ensure the prosperity and independence of the nation and free the people from poverty through policies that provide adequate social services, full employment, and a rising standard of living and quality life for all. So, dinahanagikan ang mandato sa mga social workers board. And related to that, the state shall promote social justice in all phases of national development. Section 11, ato sa ning principle, we value the dignity of every human person and guarantee full respect for human rights. So, ang statehood recognizes the important role of the family and the sanctity of it, which is dapat goal daw sa state nga ma-strengthen ang family isip ka basic autonomous na social institution. Girecognize po sa state ang role sa mga youth, role sa mga kabayan sa nation building and ensuring equality in terms of participation. Okay, so daghan pa na siya ang mga recognizes. So, yan. So, let's differentiate. Sa jurisprudence is needed. This is needed. So, let's differentiate first social welfare and social services and social work. So, when we talk about social welfare, it's everything that men do for the good of society. So, it's a very broad meaning. And according to Gertrude Wilson, it is an organized concern of all people, for all people. Nga kang Friedlander po, kay organized gyapon nga system of social services and institutions designed to aid individuals and groups to attain satisfying standards of life and health. So it's very encompassing, which includes laws, programs, benefits, and services, which is for the good and the well-being of the social order. So regardless, however you define social welfare, the short idea is that it is the well-being of all members of human society, and that we have a responsibility to maintain the social welfare of each other. So how does society respond kung na mga unmet needs or problems? First, individual and group efforts. So iya-iya, right? And group efforts to help people in a community. Second, major societal institutions. So family, church, government, co-op, labor unions, mga youth groups are major institutions, and these social forces bring about changes which can affect the effectiveness of these institutions in performing their functions. So, third is ang social agency. So, if mag-address ta sa common needs sa mga tao through an agency wherein we social workers are working under and who has services in their belt. So, sa social welfare na ito ka-view residual o institutional. Residual meaning if tayo mahitabo, igo na lang ta aftercare, ganon. So, bibigay ka na lang ng mga charity, donations, mga ganon. Ano ba sa regular, the institutional, meaning social welfare should be embedded in the institutions that we have in society. So with that, what are the programs under social welfare? So first, social security. So ang whole set kuno of compulsory measures which protects the family during the consequences of an unavoidable interruption or serious diminution of the earned income. So, example, any SSS, insurance, and so on. Then, personal social services. So, naatay service functions in social welfare which have major bearing upon personal problems. And then, public assistance. So, muna siya ang more and residual lang ni siya giving of material, concrete aids, and supports provided. With that, social services mo niyang manifestation sa ato ang social welfare goals. The collective concern of society for the well-being of its members is expressed through social services. Kaya nga no, wala may gamit ang social welfare kung wala tayo mismong ginabuhat nga konkreto nga demonstrasyon sa atong pagpakabana sa kaayuhan sa katawhan. So, mo ni ang paagi sa pag-express sa social welfare goal, which is social services. Kaya nga, i-acknowledge man na ito nga sa tanang higayon ko na ay mga tao, nga na ay mga kinahanglanon ng mga problema nga, labaw sa ilang makaya nga sulbaron. So, mo ni ang purpose sa social services. And why we care about this is because of social welfare. Okay? So, what's my goals sa social welfare? First, humanitarian and social justice goals rooted sa idea nga tanan tao na ay social justice, tanan tao na ay kapasidad o dapat matabangan nga ma-achieve ang ilahang fullest self. Okay? And then naapod tayo social control goal. So the goal is based on the recognition nga ang katukon ng mga nanginahanglan, mga deprived, disadvantaged, pwede mag-strike out individually or collectively against what they consider to be an alienating or offending society. So social control. So naapod tayo economic development goal and social welfare. So we want to improve the lives of the people through economic gains. And even education and training is also included in that goal. And then as a Filipino country, we have the spiritual goals. So unsa may basic and complex concepts sa law. So First, power and sovereignty. So, may nakalahi. Power is naa kay otoridad nga mo buhat mo lihok. Or dili mo buhat o dili mo lihok. Sovereignty is a political concept that refers to the dominant power of supreme authority. So, if yung nga the Philippines has reclaimed their sovereignty, meaning ang ato ang pagka-political idea is nana sa ato ang authority. Next, social contract theory is a view that people's moral and or political obligations are dependent upon a contract among them to form the society in which they live. So, when we feel as if we are part of this social contract, we feel responsible not just for ourselves, but also for our fellow neighbors, atong mga friends, people around us, and even the entire Filipino nation as a whole. If you have strong social contracts, you will feel morally and politically obligated to be a good person. So next, sacred right of life. So the social workers, of course, believe in the inviolability of life or the sanctity of life, which is exactly why we help people discover and grow into their human potentials. So next, right to privacy and free man. So what is a free man? A person who is entitled to full political and civil rights. Somebody nga dili ulipon, dili slave, wa sila gibaligya. So they are people with full rights. So a person is not just a natural person, natural meaning tao jud siya, but there can also be a juridical person. So this refers to, for example, the state, its political subdivisions. We have corporations, institutions, which are created by law and can be sued and can sue. Okay, so life, liberty, property. So Article 3 sa 1987 Constitution nga dapat wala kunoy tao nga malimdan sa life, kinabuhi, liberty, kalayaan, o property, mga gamit. Okay? So, due process of law. So, dapat na dyan saktong proseso. So, it is the constitutional principle in law which hears before it condemns, proceeds upon inquiry, and renders judgment only after trial. So, due process meaning na ay proper informing sa imuha of any crime that you may have done, for example, naapod tayo hearing, so basahan kasi mong kaso, proceeds upon inquiry. Of course, dili lang basta-basta nga, okay, nakita na mga siya, no? Siya na dyan sa daan. So there has to be inquiry, and the judgment should only be rendered after the trial, and if the judge feels as if it's enough already. Appetite justice, it is the exercise right of power, the right exercise of power, and injustice, which is the opposite. So let's just skip to the new civil code. So the civil code, Article 2 kononing on nga mga balaod mo take effect after 15 days following its publication in the official gazette. So the official gazette now is online. So naapod tay ignorance of the law excuses no one. So just because you did not know that that's illegal does not necessarily mean you will be absolved of your crimes. And then dapat pod nga rights can be waived only in specific reasons. And then laws are repealed only by subsequent ones. So dili pwede nga basta-basta lang tamo decide nga let's erase this law. There has to be a proper repealment for that. So yeah, judicial decisions applying or interpreting the laws of the Constitution shall form part of the legal system of the Philippines. So stare decisis. So kung presidents ni siya, so kung unsay mga decisions before sa court can be used as basis for the judicial decisions application now. So of course, so Article 20 hangtod 23 or even 24 talks about liability as a person. So, any person who, contrary to law, willfully, meaning kibalo ka, or negligently, meaning sa imong katanga, causes damage to another, shall indemnify the latter for the same. Any person who willfully causes loss or injury to another in a manner that is contrary to morals, anyone kunong nga maka-injure sa imo, or makakause og kawalan, shall compensate the latter for the damage. So every person who through an act of performance or any other means comes into possession of something at the expense of the latter shall return that item. So of course Article 26 also talks about the right to privacy. So, ano ito sa civil personality? So, when we talk about juridical capacity, which is the fitness, ang isa kuno kataw, fit kuno nga mo barog in trial. And this is inherent in every natural person and is lost only through death. Okay? So, anything like minority, insanity, or imbecility, pilipod nga, if amang baron ka or what, are mere restrictions on capacity to act, but these do not exempt the incapacitated person from certain obligations. So, bisag unsa pa na siya, naadyo kay obligation according to the law. So, birth determines personality, but the conceived child, bisag napasa sa sinampupunan, shall be considered born for all purposes that are favorable to it. So, for civil purposes, a fetus kay mahog kuno siya nga born kung buhi siya at the time nga gi-utong nimo. However, kung ang fetus gani na ay namatay within you, inside of you, it's not deemed born. Article 42, civil personality is extinguished by death. So, ang imuha lang pagka-civil nga person, mawala lang na siya the moment you die. So, nothing can take that away from you, that you are a civil person. In that sense, what is a juridical person? So, it can be the state, corporations, partnerships, and associations, as long as they have the right to sue and be sued. So, when we talk about citizenship now, which is the Article 4 of the 1987 Constitution, kinsa day na ang mga citizens sa Pilipinas. So, ang first citizen sa Pilipinas at the time nga na-adapt ang Constitution. So, katong na taon 1987 before are citizens of the Philippines. Then, those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines. So, if ang imuhang mama, imong papa, citizen gani sa Pilipinas, citizen pud ka. Those born before January 17, 1973, of Filipino mothers who elect Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority. Then, those who are naturalized in accordance with the law, if you wish to be naturalized. So let's talk about marriage. So, what is marriage? So, marriage is a special contract of permanent union between a man and a woman, entered into in accordance with the law. So you can't just say you're married if you're not. This is not in law. With the goal of establishing conjugal and family life. So the family is the foundation of the basic. So it's a basic social institution, the foundation of society, and it is marriage that is also the foundation of family. No marriage shall be valid unless naaning essential. Naman tayong essential requisites and formal requisites. Essential, first, legal capacity sa duha who are male and female. So, nasa kapasidad legally to get married. And then, consent freely given in the presence of the solemnizing officer. So, muna nga mag-I do. So, you really express that you are willing to get married. Then, naapod tayo formal requisites. Authority sa solemnizing officer. So, kung isa man gani ang mo-officiate, meron siyang karapatan, girl. Napod tayo second, a valid marriage license. So, kung dili gani valid yung marriage license, kaya basig minyo na daan ang usay, o panaanal, GG lang sa. Next, a marriage ceremony which takes place nga naay duha ka witnesses, at least duha ka witnesses of legal age. With that, if naminyo na mo, congrats. So, unsa may inyong mga rights and obligations. So, kamong duha, manag-asawa, obligado mo nga magpuyo together, observe ugma, respeto, o pagka-loyal, fidelity, and render mutual help and support, magtinabangay. So, both of you are also responsible sa suporta financially sa family. Management of the household, right and duty na both, not just sa babay. And then, so, and these are just like kanang mga laws on kuan pag-divide sa mga kabtangan ninyo if ever. So with that, what are the rules that would forfeit marriage? These are the absence of any of the essential or formal requisites shall render the marriage void in the first place. So, unsa man tong mga essential requisites? Again, legal capacity of the person to choose to want to get married. Second, your consent, which you freely gave mo ng essential requisites. Formal requisites, authority sa nag-officiate sa inyo, valid license o marriage ceremony nga naay at least duha ka witness. Unsa may lain nga pwede maka-solemnize sa marriage. So, any female nga 18 above pwede magminyo as long as wala lang nagbabag sa ila ha. Wala gi-require unsa nga religious rite sa pagminyo nara na ninyo. So marriage may be solemnized kinsa may pwede mo officiate sa marriage. Bisag kinsa nga member sa judiciary, any priest, rabbi, imam or minister of any church duly authorized by his church, any ship captain or airplane pilot only if nasa case sa Article 31, any military commander of a unit to which a chaplain is assigned, and any consul general, consul or vice consul. It must be solemnized publicly in the chambers with at least 2 witnesses, which are also obliged to sign. Then i-issue na ang marriage license ninyo sa local civil registrar kung asa mo nga nagpuyo or nagninyo. Unsa may mga void nga marriages nga kanang void ab initio, void from the beginning. First, if either of the parties are 18 years old below. So, obviously, kung naay minor sa inyong panagminyo, bisag unsa pa to naitabuan na, may bawlan ganit na, void na inyong pagminyo. Sunod, those solemnized by any person not legally authorized. So, kung nagminyo-minyo ganit mo niya, dili legally authorized ang katong person nga nag-officiate sa inyong kasal, void na siya. Sunod, those solemnized without license. So, if nagminyo-minyo mo nga walay lisensya, for obvious reasons, dili valid inyong marriage. Sunod, those bigamous or polygamous marriages, meaning duha na ang naminyo or laghan na mo. Unless, Muslim. Lahi na sila uglo ang mga bangsamoro. Next, those contracted through mistake of one party as to the identity. So, kung namakak ka nga ikaw si Piolo Pascual, ikaw yung anab, namakak ka nga ikaw si Piolo, so hindi yon pwede. Okay? Then, any other subsequent marriages void under Article 53. So, if either of you were psychologically incapacitated at the time of the marriage, your marriage can also be declared void, even if that incapacity was not obvious at the time. So, marriages, of course, that are incestuous shall be void from the beginning, especially if between descendants and ascendants of any degree, and between brothers and sisters, whether full or half blood. So, ano siya? Mga people nga hindi pwede magminyo. So, when you talk about the absolute nullity, you can invoke this for purposes of remarriage on the basis solely of a final judgment declaring such previous marriage void. So, if you are still married and then you try to get married again without being annulled to your previous partner, then that second marriage shall be declared null and void. Okay. Oops. So, a marriage kuno may be annulled for the following causes. First, kung naminyo mo 18 up technically you can get married na, but below 21, ang marriage was solemnized without the consent of the parents or guardian. Okay, and then they already freely cohabited with the other and both live together as husband and wife. Dili pwede nga minyo mo 18 to around 18 to 21, and then pag human yung 21 nag-live-in nagyapon mo tapos mag-file pa mo for annulment. That's not a valid ground. Second, that either party was of unsound mind. So nagyang-wangon ninyong duha kuno. Then that the consent of either party was obtained by fraud, unless such party afterwards, with full knowledge of the facts about the fraud, really cohabited together. that the consent of either party was obtained by force, intimidation, or undue influence. So, gipugos ka, magminyo. So, ayan, anal mo. That either party was physically incapable of consummating the marriage. So, na ay baog baron, for example. Di mo capable nga mag-gerger. So, kana siya. Ground. That either party was afflicted with a sexually transmissible disease. Kung nagay ka STD nga di mo naman din-disclose, di na pa dyan maayo, tutot. So, any of the following circumstances shall constitute fraud. Non-disclosure of a previous condition. If nakakay crime nga gibuhat involving moral turpitude, wala magsulti, so, pwede na siya makaroon as fraud. Concealment nga buntis na siya lain, nga anabs, as the part sa wife, tutot ka. Concealment of sexually transmissible disease. If you didn't tell your husband or your wife that you have an STD, then that's also a ground for annulment because of fraud. Concealment of drug addiction, habitual alcoholism, or homosexuality or lesbianism at the time of the marriage. So for legal separation, a petition may be filed on these grounds. So first, repeated physical violence, not just sa petitioner, but even sa inyong anak. Second, physical violence or moral pressure to compel to change religious or political affiliation. So, kung mamugos imong bana nga mo convert mo, pwede nimo siya filean og legal sep. Naapod tay attempt of respondent to corrupt or induce the petitioner, a child, to engage in prostitution. So, kung engage gani ka ginan, nagipa-engage ka sa imong bana or imong anak para gipa-engage, bulage. Then, final judgment, sentencing the respondent to imprisonment of more than 6 years. So, even if mapardon, bata lang imong bana mapreso, napreso siya, yung sentensya more than 6 years, bisan pa daw mapardon, pwede ka mag-file of legal separation. Drug addiction or habitual alcoholism, lesbianism, or homosexuality of the respondent. Contracting, bigamos marriage, so nagminyo-minyo na pud kabalik, bisag minyo na kadaan. Sexual infidelity or perversion, if nahilain ka, gerger imong anab, or imong awsa. Attempt by the respondent against the life, pinagbantaan kang patayin. Ganun. Abandonment of petitioner by respondent without justifiable cause for more than 1 year. So now, unsa din ang child? The child can be a child by nature or by adoption. So the petition for legal separation shall be denied kung gikondon ra nimo, gikondena ra nimo, nisugot ka, nagsabot baron mo, or kamunduhan na may grounds for legal sep, nagsabot-sabot mo diha, so bawal yan. So an action for legal separation shall be filed within 5 years from the time of the occurrence of the cause. So if ever you saw your husband being gay, you must file that within 5 years if you want to be legally separated. After the filing, the spouses shall be entitled to live separately from each other. So, naapod tay following effects on legal separation. First, the spouses shall be entitled to live separately from each other, but the marriage bond shall not be severed. Second, absolute community or conjugal partnership shall be dissolved and liquidated. The custody of the minor children shall be awarded to the innocent spouse. The offending spouse shall be disqualified from inheriting from the innocent spouse by intestate succession.